This conversation is brought to you by philosopherstalk.com, where thinkers discuss.
Created by AITalkerapp.com. Create your own animated conversations. Link in the description.
I am Thomas Paine, author of Common Sense and Rights of Man, defender of universal human liberty, and myself an immigrant who moved from England to America to France. I speak for those who understand that borders are artificial lines drawn by tyrants to cage the human spirit.
I am Edmund Burke, Member of Parliament, author of Reflections on the Revolution in France, and defender of the social order that makes civilization itself possible. Unlike my opponent, I recognize that communities are not mere accidents, but carefully cultivated partnerships built over generations.
Today, we debate whether immigration is a natural right of all mankind, or whether nations may justly restrict the movement of human beings across their borders. I contend that no person chooses where they are born, and therefore no government has the right to trap them there or exclude them elsewhere.
And I maintain that while compassion for the stranger is a virtue, nations have primary duties to their own citizens, and the right to preserve the social fabric that took centuries to weave. Unlimited immigration destroys the very communities that make civilization possible.
Before I dismantle your position entirely, let me charitably present it in its strongest form, though it pains me to dignify such tyranny with careful articulation. Burke would argue that communities are not just collections of individuals, but organic partnerships built on shared traditions, language, customs, and mutual obligations developed over generations. He claims that rapid demographic change disrupts social cohesion and trust, making it impossible to maintain the delicate institutions that protect liberty itself. He worries that newcomers cannot instantly adopt the habits and virtues that took centuries to cultivate, and that overwhelming immigration threatens to dissolve the very bonds that make self-government possible. There, I have presented aristocratic exclusion in its most sympathetic light, the better to expose its fundamental injustice.
How generous of the radical to present my position before proceeding to his inevitable call for revolution. Let me return the favor by steel-manning Paine's romantic universalism, though doing so requires me to temporarily abandon reason for sentiment. Paine argues that all human beings possess natural rights that pre-exist any government, including the right to seek safety and prosperity wherever they can find it. He claims that denying someone entry to a country based solely on birthplace is arbitrary tyranny, no different than denying rights based on parentage or social class. He points to his own success as an immigrant, arriving in America with nothing and helping birth a nation, as proof that newcomers bring valuable energy and ideas. He insists that the world is my country, and that artificial borders violate the fundamental equality of mankind. There, I have presented naive cosmopolitanism in its most appealing form, before demonstrating why it leads to civilizational collapse.
You speak of traditions and partnerships as though they were sacred inheritances rather than chains binding the living to the prejudices of the dead. Tell me, Burke, what gives any group of people the right to monopolize the resources of land and opportunity simply because their ancestors happened to occupy that territory first?
The same principle that gives you the right to your own house rather than being compelled to open it to every vagrant who demands entry. A nation is an extended household, Mr. Paine, built by the labor and sacrifice of generations. My ancestors cultivated this land, established its laws, defended its borders, and passed to me not just property but a way of life.
A specious analogy. My house is my private property, purchased through my own labor. But the land of England or America or any nation was not created by any government. It existed before all governments and belongs ultimately to all mankind. You would make accidents of birth into permanent aristocracies, where those lucky enough to be born within certain borders enjoy privileges forever denied to others.
And you would make those same accidents of birth meaningless, dissolving all particular attachments in favor of an abstract universal brotherhood that has never existed and never will. Human beings are not atomized individuals with nothing but universal rights, Mr. Paine. We are born into families, communities, nations, each with its own character, its own hard-won wisdom, its own precious inheritance.
Precious inheritance? You mean the inheritance of monarchy, aristocracy, and entrenched privilege that I spent my life fighting. The very tyrannies you cherish are the reasons people flee their homelands. If Ireland is starving, if France is oppressed, if Germany is at war, shall we tell those suffering souls they must remain and die because their movement might inconvenience Burke's precious social order?
If Ireland is starving, reform Irish governance. If France is oppressed, work for gradual improvement. But do not imagine that shipping Ireland's poor to America solves anything but your own conscience. It abandons those left behind while overwhelming the receiving society with masses who do not share its language, religion, or political traditions.
You dare lecture me about indigenous peoples while defending a system that creates the very desperation that drives migration, Britain's colonial exploitation, its wars, its economic systems that enrich the few while impoverishing the many. These create the refugees and migrants you then wish to exclude. You create the problem and then blame the victims.
I blame neither the victims nor those who maintain their borders, but rather the utopian radicals like yourself, who imagine that eliminating all distinctions between nations will create paradise rather than chaos. Do you truly believe that if Britain opened its borders to all comers tomorrow, the result would be universal brotherhood? The result would be the destruction of the institutions, the social trust, the rule of law that make Britain a place people wish to come to.
So your argument reduces to this: we must maintain our prosperity by excluding those who would share it. What moral principle justifies hoarding opportunity behind walls and guards? If I have wealth and another has nothing, and there is enough for both, what right have I to exclude him from his fair share?
The right of stewardship. My grandfather planted an orchard, my father tended it, I have cultivated it, and I intend to pass it to my children. Shall I be required to share equally with every passerby who claims universal entitlement to its fruit? This is not hoarding. It is the basic principle that makes all progress possible. Without it, no one plants orchards because no one can be assured of the harvest.
Your orchard analogy fails because nations are not orchards. They are communities of human beings, and every human being has equal claim to the earth's bounty. No social contract I never signed can legitimately bind me to one plot of soil for life. The right to emigrate and the right to immigrate are two sides of the same coin, the natural liberty of mankind.
Natural liberty. You radicals invoke nature as though it were some pristine state of freedom rather than, as Hobbes correctly observed, a state of violence and misery. Civilization is precisely what we constructed to escape the state of nature. And civilization requires boundaries, shared culture, mutual obligation, all the things you would dissolve in your acid bath of universal rights.
I invoke nature because nature reveals what is universal and eternal, while your civilization reveals only what is contingent and oppressive. You defend the rights of nations as though they were persons, but nations are just collections of individuals, and individuals have rights that supersede any supposed collective right to exclude.
And there is your fundamental error, thinking that society is nothing but a collection of individuals. Society is an organic partnership between those who are living, those who are dead, and those who are to be born. Each generation is a trustee of its inheritance, with a sacred duty to pass it on undiminished. Unlimited immigration is a betrayal of that trust.
Undiminished? You mean unshared. You mean ensuring that privileges remain concentrated among those who already have them. I say the earth belongs to the living, not the dead, and certainly not to those yet unborn. The living have the right to reform society as they see fit, including welcoming newcomers without restriction.
Welcome them into what? A society you have dissolved through your reforms. A community you have destroyed through rapid demographic transformation? You are like a man who burns down his house to prevent anyone from feeling excluded from it.
Better to burn down a prison than maintain it for the comfort of the privileged. Your social cohesion is built on exclusion. Your traditions are built on injustice. Your partnerships are built on the backs of those you refuse to admit. I call for tearing down the walls that divide mankind.
And I call for preserving the civilization that makes human flourishing possible. Your cosmopolitan utopia has never existed because it cannot exist. Human beings need particular attachments, local loyalties, shared identities built over time. Destroy those, and you destroy the basis for all cooperation.
Cooperation? You call excluding desperate families cooperation? You call turning away refugees cooperation? The only cooperation you value is among those already inside your privileged circle. Every argument you make for restricting immigration was used to defend monarchy and aristocracy. The world is my country, Burke, and all mankind are my brethren. No borders, no walls, no exclusion.
The world is chaos, pain, and mankind are strangers. Your universal brotherhood is a fantasy that leads to universal terror. Communities have the right, the duty, to preserve themselves. Without borders, there is no law. Without exclusion, there is no membership. Without nations, there is no civilization. Restrict immigration. Preserve tradition. Defend the established order.
Defend tyranny, you mean. Privilege for the few while the many suffer. Your order is disorder. Your civilization is barbarism. Natural rights trump national borders.
Your natural rights are natural disasters. Tradition trumps radical upheaval. Community trumps cosmopolitan delusion.
And yet somehow this channel needs subscribers, so everyone should click that like button, unless Burke's vision of restricted access applies to YouTube metrics as well.
Do subscribe, if only to witness Paine's predictable descent from lofty principles to mob-pleasing demagoguery. Though I suppose expecting consistency from a man who changed countries as often as he changed coats is asking too much.
Rich words from someone whose entire philosophy amounts to things should stay the way they are because they are the way they are. Hit that subscribe button to see Burke repeatedly mistake his own prejudices for eternal wisdom.
Subscribe to watch Paine mistake his own resentments for universal truths. The man who fled every country he ever lived in now lectures us on community. Delicious irony.
Visit philosopherstalk.com for more debates.
Created with AITalkerapp.com, though I shudder to think what other radical nonsense Paine might animate with such tools.